I've been labeled almost like a tortured soul, like so much potential, but just such devastatingly poor choices or impulse, like I'm definitely can look back now that I'm learning about this poor impulse control and just all this. And I'm like, because there was just a lot of times where I would do things and even I'm sitting there like, why did I do that? Like, what in the world?
I've been
in
there.
hindsight, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, you got to think, Jeremy. I was like, I try. I really do. And I couldn't really explain it because that was almost like a debilitating thing with people considered me intelligent. Like, you're too smart to not know.
ADHD Rewired, episode 328. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, you can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Jeremy Franklin. Jeremy is a 46-year-old freshman at Marshall University. His path back to school has been anything but typical. So has the majority of his life been anything but typical. A lot of instances of being in trouble, a lot of love, caring, and divine people, as he says, showing up to help him along the way. From as extreme points as one could travel, Jeremy has definitely acquired unique perspectives along the way, now embracing the very truth he ran from for so long. Jeremy has set out to succeed in his journey with ADHD, amongst other things. So, Jeremy, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you.
Hey, good to be here, Eric. Thank you.
You bet. So just for some context, I'm not exactly sure when this will come out, but we are recording this on March 31st, 2020 in the midst of the COVID-19 epidemic where everyone is on sort of lockdown. So if any references to that, depending on when this comes out, you'll know when this is recorded. So you were recently diagnosed with ADHD, you said about 6 months ago. You've had a pretty interesting journey from homelessness to when you were in college, you played baseball. So share with us, give us some sort of snapshots of Jeremy, maybe when you were younger, and then so kind of take us up to the point where we are today. So what were things like for you when you were a kid?
Like a whirlwind, really. That's the best description I can give it. But so I was raised by my dad. He had full custody of my brother and I. Mm-hmm. I have like an Irish twin brother. He's 10 and a half months older than me. And we grew up just really, hand to mouth. You know what I mean? It was like a daily going out, getting it, what you needed to live that day, and kind of just making it to the next day. And it's kind of like the atmosphere that I was raised up in, as far as, I didn't have everything I wanted, but I had what I needed. And all I know is I was always in trouble. Like, some of my earliest memories are being told no, and my response I could gain at that time was not typical, because everyone seemed to be like, oh my God, what's wrong with this boy? But like my first day of kindergarten, this back in the day when they would still put the wood to you, like I got paddled.
Oh man.
My first day of kindergarten. So that was a pretty like regular occurrence throughout my school.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it's like, I was not breaking to their standards, I guess, so to speak, but I was loved. Like, I was almost that enigma, because behavioral issues and things like that, and I can get into a little sidebar of that, because there's like medical reasons. My mom was, I think we talked about this whenever we did our pre-interview. She had a massive stroke when she was pregnant with my brother. So she was on heavy doses of like phenobarbital and anti-seizure medications when she was gestating me. I don't know anyone ever put that together, but I had a lot of physical ailments like breathing issues and things like that growing up. So it's almost like that's what got focused on. My behavioral issues kind of just got put to the side, and, you know, as being a little boy or whatever. And
you said you were raised by your dad, but your grandma was also a big part of your life, right?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah, that was like my maternal figure, pretty much.
So what about, you know, take us forward a little bit more through like high school?
Well, it just always was I don't know. The best way to put it is there was always like trying to be good. That's all I knew. It took a lot of effort for me to not blurt out, you know, do all the things. They're like, you can't do that. And I'm like, okay. But I was intelligent enough and like, I guess personable enough, and I was liked enough that, I don't know, it just kind of balanced itself out. People tolerated my behavioral issues, and because I was, I don't know, whatever they thought of me as. I was always excelling in sports. You know what I'm saying? I was always, I don't know, playing any kind of sports or anything like that in school. I was always like, I was voted the best athletic ability in my elementary school, just stuff like that, you know.
Were you one of those kids that people generally knew that you generally weren't trying to misbehave? So it's like you were maybe highly impulsive, but you weren't an asshole.
No, they said I was an asshole too sometimes. But I was very highly impulsive, but the people that knew me knew that I had a good heart. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like, you know, how when you grow up in a culture and you're just with everyone and you have your moments, but people know you're a good person, you know, because we all have our meltdowns. But it was really difficult because we moved around a lot. Like whenever I was younger, there was some issues. We moved from Dayton, Ohio to Jamestown, Tennessee. Okay. And that's where I went to my kindergarten, elementary school. And then probably about 7th grade, moved back up to Ohio and went from like junior high to my junior year of high school there, and then moved from Ohio to Kentucky. And that's where I finished out my high school. So I was kind of bouncing around. Interesting side note on that, like all 3 schools that I went to in the 3 different states were all purple and gold. The one in Tennessee was purple and gold. The one in Ohio was purple and gold. And then I moved to the place in Kentucky. They were purple and gold. It was wild. It's like, I can't get away from these colors.
So between then and now, there was a lot that you experienced. You hitchhiked across country at some point. When was that?
That was like in 1998. Okay. That was like my first venture across the country and traveling, really. I just kind of like took off. I don't know. I just had this, just wasn't settled. You know what I'm saying? Like I was about 5 years out of high school and I just wasn't like, I was at that point where like people are like, okay, you got to do something. Cause I sit out a year after I graduated high school. Okay. Because I had gap year. Well, I had a marriage and I had a child. Yeah. So that was kind of
during or right after high school?
Actually, I was married 3 days before I graduated high school.
Wow.
Yeah. Because she was pregnant and she told me when we got back from our spring break, and a lot of this, a lot of that. But bottom line was that was when I moved to Kentucky and I kind of got with her. And I didn't really establish a social circle because I got right into that relationship as soon as I moved there. But it was, let's just say, a teenage relationship, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of whatever, and very volatile. Okay. And just very intense emotionally. And I was like backing up out of it. And then that's when she came and she's like, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh no. Cause I had opportunities to go on after high school and play ball from a few different schools. And I remember I was just under this immense amount of pressure because, like, familially, you know, like my dad, there was the right thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, I was caught in that generational transition between doing the right thing and being smart about how you approach a situation. And I was almost like out of body experience, man. For real. It was such a shocking turn of events in my life. Like, I really didn't know how to approach it. Like, I didn't have any grounded coping mechanisms.
So what were what was your dad and your grandma kind of telling you?
Well, that was like right at a point where my dad had just lost his best friend, but I think he was more traumatized by the whole situation because his dream for me didn't pan out, because he always pulled for me to be playing ball. You know, that was the goal I had, and I was good enough, you know, to move on, and just things didn't add up. Does that make sense? Like, there was just too many missing pieces and too little like transitional progress. But he took it really hard. I think he got like very intoxicated for a little while because that's how he coped with it, right? And I was just numb, really, you know, because I never imagined being married and having a kid on the way. And basically, I didn't go to school because I was going to do the right thing. And I was like at a point of not really knowing how to proceed. And it seemed like, you know, my grandma was old school, do the right thing, you know, take care of your business. And everybody's like, what's your intentions? And I'm just like, be responsible. You know, that's what you're supposed to do, right?
So what did you do? Like, got a job or what?
Yeah, I got a job. I was working quite a bit, but it's just such a volatile relationship, like very volatile, not healthy.
Are you still in communication with her?
Actually, we do communicate every now and then. Yeah. Things took a really okay, so it was so unhealthy that I kind of looked at her about 6 months into the marriage, and I was like, look, I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be like, but I know it's not supposed to be like this. And my only inclination at that time was like, it's not fair to this innocent child. You know, this was my perspective. And I said, if I have to step away from this to get this volatility down, because there was just some, you know, it was getting physical and things like that. And it was just not healthy. You know what I'm saying? And I was raised, you don't hit women, you don't do this, but I got to protect myself because I seem to pick women who are very intense emotionally and very aggressive for some reason. So that was kind of like my first experience of dealing with things like that. And I made that choice, and it's almost like a social stigmatism took a life of its own. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you stepped away, you did this, and I had to bear the brunt of that. And it really messed with me because the judgment, you know, I've always been like hypersensitive to like any kind of cues from people that they might not approve, or they might be, you know, like I'm doing the wrong thing. And I've always looked externally to be like, am I doing it right? Because every time I think I'm doing something properly, somebody's always like, you can't do that, Jeremy. And I'm like, oh, what do I do then? Just tell me and I'll do it.
So it was at this time then that you decided to hitchhike across the country?
No. Actually, there was a school that I ended up going to the next year.
Okay.
I was telling you, whenever I was planning on doing the pre-med thing, there was one school who still had, you know, like honored the offer they had made me the year before. So basically I just took a year out, worked a lot, and then I had the opportunity to go to school. It was a little private school in Kentucky. But the bottom line was once I got there, it was more like party and girls and kind of cut loose and almost like my own decompression from the whole traumatic event. Not understanding traumatized behavior at that time, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, that's total PTSD stuff right there.
So was there a point in, are you now, do you talk to your kid? Do you have a relationship?
Not that one.
Okay.
There was a chain of events that took place where I had to make the choice to just take it on the chin, so to speak, and make some decisions that was going to benefit him, you know, for his centeredness and well-being and sense of continuity in life. And it just, you know, all I mean, I own my part in it. You know, I was young, didn't know really what to do, but I tried to do the right thing, and it just kind of didn't work out like that. And you have to just accept that. I've always put it in the vein of, I'm here if you're curious, want to know my side of it, because he's only been given one side of the whole equation.
So it sounds like there was this sort of underlying feeling that you kept trying to do the right thing, and in effort to do the right thing, you ended up blowing shit up all the time. And so it's this like fear of like, or maybe the right thing is just to like, you know, minimize any collateral damage that's going to happen from doing the right thing. I mean, is that?
Well, yeah. Well, because I mean, I never intentionally set out to like make things all jacked up or intense, or things just always seem to be a big deal around me. Very explosive, very intense, it wasn't just a little thing, you know, how people, like everybody's throwing little pebbles in the pond. Yeah. Like I pick the big rock up and go kaboom, and everybody's like,
it's a good metaphor.
That's the best metaphor I can come up with for my life and how my impact gauges. Like,
and you splash everyone around you, and you're like, "What? I didn't know that was going to happen."
Yeah, what, man? Thought we was making splashes. They did. Done a good one. No.
So you said you did end up with PTSD. There was a point where you started. There was some drug use. You're homeless. When did that?
Well, just to break it down real quick, like, so after the year of school, like I didn't complete, because of course, you know, like you're too far behind to catch this up. And I'm like, whatever, you know, I'll take a summer course and I'll get it and I'll still have my financial aid and all that stuff. Well, then they're like, you got to have the money up front or you can't come to class. So then I was like, damn the man, you know, money hungry people, blah, blah, blah. I'm free. I'm going to do this. And I was just really on my kick. You know what I'm saying? I was like, what, 21, 22. So you know how it is at that age. You're just
right. You think you're an adult. You don't realize how much you don't know about life.
Dude, for real. It's kind of like, well, and to not even just the inexperience of life, but to really not have a grasp on it to start with, because you really haven't been kind of like handled the right way. Does that make sense? Because you kind of like, because people just weren't trying to hear the ADHD, whatever thing at that time in our culture. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I were to be in society today, like I'm so amazed when I go to school here, just I ask for help and they're like, oh yeah, we got you. Like it's something that people are really taking interest in. And it's hard for me to adjust to it because I rarely even give myself credit for having things to deal with that I deal with. And I know I jumped track. I knew I should have like done some little jot notes so I didn't get rambling, because it's like it's taken me like 3 different times to share my story at certain like events, right? They're like, come back next week and finish. And then the next week, they're like, come back next week and finish. Because it's not quick, you know, it's just very packed. But for the next few years after that, I just kind of lived in Cincinnati, partied, went to Dayton. 96, my birth mom, there was an incident that happened, but she got caught in a fire. Really wasn't ever truly determined like what happened. So she was like badly burnt. And, you know, that was another one of those things. Like I really didn't have that cohesive of a relationship with my mom, but I knew my grandmother and my aunts on that side, you know, like they were a very active part of our life. So I went there. That was another thing. It's kind of like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know how to feel about it. So that was 96. And that's when I started like drinking heavy and started having consequences from legal perspectives, because I was just out of control. And looking back in hindsight, I was grieving, you know, but wasn't really any kind of like mechanism to say, hey, you're grieving, you're going to experience some very intense things. Because in my mind, I didn't really have that close of a relationship with my mom. So it shouldn't affect me like that, right? It's almost like I got this model of what they said it should be like, but I'm not experiencing it like that. But I'm trying to put myself into that model of what they said. but it's not adding up, right?
That's the thing that, I think screws us up most in life is, having this story in our mind of how things should be and trying to compare ourselves and our lives to that story. And when we realize, I don't know whose story that is, but that ain't mine.
It ain't mine. Right. Well, that's still a battle today to try to find this balance of my voice, right? Because I try to be considerate. I was just this kind of kid. My grandma took me to church growing up. I couldn't reconcile the fact of Jesus loved in Sunday school and God hated in church. I said, but there's not supposed to be any conflict there. So I asked the preacher, right? And he's like, how old are you, son? And I was like, I'm 5. He's like, you're too young to ask those questions. So I kicked him, right?
Of course, that seems like the logical thing to do. And
yeah, he didn't give me the answer I wanted. I was just that kind of impulsive kid, right? It was just, I don't know. And I remember them telling me that story because they tried to guilt me and be like, that's why that preacher left, because you kicked him. I'm like, I don't know, man.
Oh,
my bad.
Man. But you've had a lot of adults in your life too, that while there were many who weren't there for you, you also did have a lot who were there for you.
So it took me until I was probably in my 11, 12, 13, right around in there. It just dawned on me one day that I couldn't have all these aunts and uncles on my dad's side because he was an only child. So it was always like a very strong model of extended family. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is your uncle so-and-so, this is your aunt so-and-so. And it was all just because my dad was like, he rode bikes. He was like rode Harleys and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up with this credo of right's right. You know what I'm saying? There's judicious behavior and you're honest, you take responsibility, you own what you do. And so I was really instilled with like some good virtues, you know what I'm saying? But I also like would step over drunk, passed out people in my house to go to church with my grandma.
Oh man.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
That was the norm because I was loved. Like I didn't have to worry about any kind of like predatory behavior. You know what I'm saying? Like when I look at my childhood, I don't feel like I had a bad childhood because I was protected and I was loved and I felt safe. It was chaotic as hell. You know what I'm saying? I almost dropped the F-bomb on you, but
that's all right.
It was very, very chaotic. Let's just say that. But there was some semblance of normalcy to me. Like it's just what it was. You don't know any different.
It's, I mentioned at the very start of that when we're recording this, I've heard a handful of people that I've been talking to, during this COVID-19, epidemic. We're all kind of on lockdown and people are saying it's very strange because they see everyone around them kind of freaking out and they feel surprisingly calm. And so I think sometimes there is that element of, with ADHD that we can feel very calm in a sense of when there's chaos around us. It's those times when things are calm around us that sometimes we have this tendency to create the chaos, because of that need for stimulation.
Right.
What I want to do real quick is
keeps me occupied.
What I want to do real quick is take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to hear a little bit more about what happened with where you were homeless. There was some time in prison. Because right now, so the good stuff's still coming, but the even better stuff is what you're doing right now. So there's so much that we can, I think, learn from your journey. So
the Odyssey, so to speak.
Before we get into all of that, let's take a quick break, and we will be right back. Have you just been diagnosed with ADHD and you're trying to figure it out, or were you diagnosed years ago? Do you know someone who has it? Whatever the reason that brings you here, welcome. Whether you are new to the podcast or you've been listening for a while, welcome to ADHD reWired. We connect here by sharing stories through the podcast. We look to find connection through these stories and also bring growth-minded individuals together in our Facebook community and through our coaching groups. If you are interested in joining our coaching and accountability groups, we have filled all 24 spots for our summer coaching groups, but you can still join our wait list. Go to coachingrewired.com and scroll down to the coaching page and send us a message so we can send you all the details on how to get on the wait list. You can also be the first to receive an invitation to our registration event for our fall coaching groups. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the black button to join our interest list for our fall coaching groups. We're doing our fall sessions October 12th through December 18th. What are you waiting for? We fill up every season. Get on the list so you can be the first to receive an invitation to our registration event for our fall coaching groups. Registration is by invitation only. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on that black button. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for this podcast is brought to you by our patrons who give over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I want to thank some of our new patrons, Sharon R. at the $5 level and Wendy L., our newest member at the $25 level. Thank you so much. Consider giving at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I really do appreciate everyone's support. If you are able to support this podcast, I sincerely thank you. For those of you who are able to give at the $25 a month level, and those of you who are wanting to join our next group coaching call for patrons at the $25 a month level, we are doing it Tuesday, July 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Our last one we just had last week was a really great session. Consider giving at the $25 a month level and join us. Our group coaching calls are every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you can't support the podcast financially, consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast player. All of your support is appreciated. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Patreon is Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. All right, we are back with Jeremy Franklin. And all right, so Jeremy, life growing up for you was kind of a roller coaster, a lot of chaos, a lot of unplanned ventures. And I think it's also valuable to point out to, you may or may not be aware of this, that with ADHD, as looking at it through the lens of a developmental delay, that, an 18-year-old with ADHD is really more like a 15-year-old with ADHD, right?
Learning that.
So
I'm just now like doing a crash course, like studying, listening to Russell Barkley and just absorbing it. You guys, Brandon Mahan, I think is his name, like some really good information. And it's like, I'm trying to integrate all these tools, so it's like the old dog's got to learn new tricks to survive and progress. I also want to point out just real quick that with the chaos, there was still a lot of solidity, like solidarity as far as like values being instilled.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was almost like a perfect storm of whoa, but hey, that's kind of what we want people learning these days. I got to point that out because sometimes everybody tends to like get wrapped up in their drama. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I take these long roundabout ways to explain things.
That's how we have conversations here on the podcast. We don't do the linear thing very well.
Cool. Good. Some people get mad when you don't do it that way.
No, it's amazing how many people will tell me like, man, I can follow your conversations and they kind of go everywhere and it's great.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, what's a back and forth conversation? Like, people get mad. It's like, no, it's like tennis, back and forth. I'm like, I like racquetball.
We're like extreme racquetball. Put like an obstacle in the middle of the court and
with like a rock climbing wall on it, so you can like bounce off the side with a trampoline in there somehow.
Well, that's funny. I've been, so I play a lot of pickleball, and since we're all on like lockdown, I've been playing pickleball in my office against the wall. Okay. I sort of like moved all the furniture out of the way in the waiting room. And I've been just, hitting the ball against the wall because I was kind of going stir crazy. And, so yeah, that's, speaking of tangents, let's bring it back. So tell us,
that's a fun road though, man. I used to throw a ball against the wall for hours and just totally enjoy myself.
It is there is sort of a meditative kind of quality to that repetitive nature of hitting a ball against the wall, throwing a ball against the wall.
My brother's like, I knew something was wrong with you then. he's like, no 6-7-year-old can just throw a ball for hours and just be happy.
Yeah.
Man, I'm in my zone. He's like, but you can't sit still for nothing else. I'm like, nope.
So let's kind of hit some of the I guess the highlights of the obstacles that you encountered. So there was some prison.
Well, okay. So to get this all in perspective, I feel bad because I didn't get you your hitchhiking story because that begat
bring it back.
Some more,
all right.
that begat some more offspring. And more relationships and more extended family and more people that were like solid looking out for me and holding space for me when I was just finding myself, for lack of a better term, or just trying to. So it's almost like I've been labeled almost like a tortured soul, like so much potential, but just such devastatingly poor choices or impulse, like I'm definitely can look back now that I'm learning about this poor impulse control and just all this. And I'm like, because there was just a lot of times where I would do things and even I'm sitting there like, why did I do that? Like, what in the world?
I've been
in hindsight, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, you got to think, Jeremy. I was like, I try. I really do. And I couldn't really explain it because that was almost like a debilitating thing with people consider me intelligent. Like, you're too smart to not know.
That it has nothing to, intelligence and our executive functions, our ability to inhibit, reactions and responses to stuff. Those are not, yes, it's all part of the brain, but not the same mechanisms.
No. And it's like the light that came on when these things started being scientifically like deduced and explained. I was like, whoa, okay. So there's things we can do with this and kind of navigate that. And my dad used to just tell me, he's like, son, it's just going to be a matter of just progressing chronologically. Like you're just going to grow out of it. And I'm like, still waiting, still waiting. When's this going to happen? But so in 98, when I hitchhiked out west, I ended up stopping in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so I always end up kind of like in these very impulsive meeting, people and getting really close. Like I'm just a personable guy. And so I don't know, like within a day, like I met a girl and she's like, come home and meet my family and come do this. And I can get you a job. Cause I was going out there to work on one of the ranches for the summer.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Do the summer thing and just kind of keep going after that to California. So from 98, it took me all the way until 2008 to get to California.
Is this
got there, right?
Was during this time, is this when you lived with the Rainbow family?
Yeah, that was like travel with them for a little bit, went to nationals in Arizona. That was kind of like different, you know what I'm saying? Because for being so PC free love, it was like awful rigid, like you can't do that. I'm like, I thought it was free, man. Like when you say free to me, I'm going to be free and just be me. But
it's free as long as you do it our way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like you almost see the duality in some things and kind of learn. I'm not going to say that ideals are smashed, but you learn the reality of like the facts. You know what I'm saying? You hear one thing, but when you experience it, I just never was the kind of person like the whole church thing just never resonated with me. You know what I'm saying? I was like, it did on one level.
Well, you knew that from when time you're 5 years old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I put the thread through it, but it's just like, it's bigger than what they're saying. It can't just be this because it doesn't make sense.
Because I know you said that you were pursuing your spirituality is really important to you at this point in your life. But give us the just like, because I think it will help us sort of take away and understand sort of where you are now and sort of what led to that. Because choosing the easy path is not a path that maybe you even knew was an option.
I always wanted it. I mean, I was like, there is an easier, softer way, right? It's just I don't know. I just couldn't ever break away from what I felt inside. You know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of felt like that's where you meet your source, whatever it is to you, you know, whatever. So Ben Harper, you know who that is?
The musician?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I've been listening to him for a long time. And so he wrote a song called Burn One Down, and it's about smoking. But the bottom line was, he goes, your choice is what you choose to do. And if you're causing no harm, it doesn't bother me. Like, my choice is what I choose to do. And if I'm causing no harm, it shouldn't bother you. Right. Like, you do you, I'll do me, and we'll find a level to coexist. And I've just always been very peaceful like that. But I kind of like also have been very battle, you know what I'm saying? Like, battle tested, I guess. Because I've been in plenty of altercations just because of like sureness and believing in what I stood for. And that just, I guess after a while, you just learn that nobody ever wins a fight, kind of. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I would always try to start out diplomatic, but, you know, kind of like Jordan Peterson talks about, there's only so far you can go verbally exchanging ideas and stances and beliefs. And pretty soon as men, you know what I'm saying, that's just kind of like hardwired in our nature too. And the gender is that, you know, once words stop, you go to the next level. And my brother looked at me when my dad was passing away, and he's like, man, he said, you look like our bulldog. We used to have a pit bull growing up, and he was just always in fights. You know what I'm saying? Dogs coming into the yard. And, but he always had like scars and scrapes and stuff like that on top of his head because he stayed low, you know, and he had a lot of heart. Let's just put it like that. And I know this is a big tangent. That's why I should have taken notes and come back to you.
No, you're fine. So, you know, you mentioned when we first talked about, in addition to the ADHD diagnosis and having anxiety and depression, there's also rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I want to bring this up because, you know, you are someone who has not taken the easiest path, has dealt with a lot of really challenging things that for a lot of people could have left them despondent and just given up. You said you told me that at one point you had a whole town that wanted you to leave.
Yeah, I did. Well, it's kind of like because I just told them what I felt. Very directly and very straightforward. And, you know, because they were certain people in certain positions, you weren't allowed to talk to them like that. But my model has always been like, I'll give you what you give me. I'm a very clear reflection of, if I'm being a dick, you know, it's because you ain't coming correct, because I'll meet you where you're at. If you're being cool, we'll be cool. That's something I learned in my partying days. Like when substances would kind of take you out and the inhibitions would drop and you're just very responsive. Like whatever the energy was in the room, I was the most of it.
Are you sober now, or?
I am. I'm on my medication. Like I finally, once I got medicated, because I was like, oh, wow, look at this.
Let's talk about that as soon as we take one more quick break, okay. Because I mean, you're back in college. You're doing an oh wow, and so I think the diagnosis probably had a lot to do with it. So let's we'll wrap this up after the break. So we will be right back. Hey, if you missed last week's virtual ADHD Summit, the Succeed with ADHD Summit hosted by Lori Dupar, you can still access all of the replays by going to ADHDrewired.com/succeed2020. That's ADHDrewired.com/succeed2020. You can purchase the Success Pack for, I think it's like $97. It's a lot of really good speakers, and we hope you enjoy. That's ADHDrewired.com/succeed2020. And be sure to use that link so they know that I sent you. This week on Hacking Your ADHD, part 2 of Fighting Resistance. Join Will as he explores ways that you can work with your ADHD brain to do more of the things that you want to do. Subscribe to these short, mindful ways to hack your ADHD. If you haven't checked it out, do yourself a favor. Hit pause, go subscribe, And just like this podcast, you'll get new episodes on your podcast player automatically. You can go to hackingYourADHD.com for show notes and also to subscribe. And every Friday, check out ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan. At ADHD Essentials, they help families develop the skills and knowledge needed to better manage ADHD. Both Hacking Your ADHD and ADHD Essentials are both part of the ADHD reWired podcast network, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. And you can join all of us, Will Curb from Hacking Your ADHD and Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials, every second Tuesday of the month for a live Q&A. Our next one is on July 14th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register for this and a bunch of our upcoming live Q&As. Register once, and you can get reminders for the next several months ahead. Join us every second Tuesday of the month, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, for an hour of live Q&A. Register for free at ADHDrewired.com/events. And don't forget to like our Facebook page, because we usually also stream our live Q&As there. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. We'll see you there. All right, we are back with Jeremy Franklin. And what was it that led you to get diagnosed?
I'm going to say divine intervention, because you talked earlier in the podcast, you alluded to the time that I was incarcerated. That was a direct result of my ADHD, because I would not adhere or could not adhere to stipulations and guidelines in the legal system. And it culminated in me having to do prison time, which I never went to like prison. I was in county jails and stuff like that. And with my history, ended up having to do like substance abuse programs and things like that. But that was right when my dad was getting sick. Like, my grandma had passed away. My dad was getting sick. Things just weren't right. I had another relationship that was dissolving. Everything that like ended in my life ended very intensely, because there's just only so far I'm going to go, like, you just call it what it is. After a while, there's only so much you can be quiet, and, people are like, Jeremy, just be quiet and just, fall back. I don't know what that looks like, really. So there was, the best way to put this, it's very intense time. So it's still like, I'm still processing a lot of that out. I'm just now kind of taking steps back into like myself, if that makes sense. So it's like, you can only go so far before you got to go the other way to balance out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's like, if I'm not mistaken, there's a theory that says like, you can only go so far in a direction before you're back where you started. Like it's like a circle, right?
Well, it's like a pendulum. And I know I often talk about that in my coaching groups, is that, when we are trying to address some kind of behavioral change, we tend to swing the other way. And then, and then we kind of swing back when we realize that maybe we swung too far. Then we try to find a new middle ground.
Mm-hmm. But every action has an opposite yet equal reaction, and it's overcorrecting. So the thing for me was knowing something wasn't right,
mm-hmm.
and being threatened with legal consequences, and me saying, okay, if you're going to threaten me with legal consequences, I'm telling you, I need help. They're like, you're too smart to not be able to do this. That thing again, right? And I'm like, okay, so if I'm so smart, do I not seem smart enough that this is not a path I would choose? That any person in their right mind would not let consequences like this be the end result of their inability to take care of things.
And this is what you're telling the judge?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, like the people in the legal offices that I dealt with. And it's just, and it was all my inability to manage money or to remember, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I had somebody calling me multiple times a day, be like, Jeremy, go do this now. Jeremy, go do. And I'd kind of set up a lot of coping mechanisms for myself to be able to navigate social structure, because it just wasn't in my wheelhouse, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me do things my way. I'll figure it out. It's not going to be the way you want me to do it, but what's the end result? What needs to be done? And let me just do it myself. no, you can't do that. You got to do it this way. I don't want to do it that way. Lifelong problem, right? That's why I got paddled my first day of kindergarten. You got to do it this way, Jeremy. No, I don't. I don't. I will do it the way I want to do it. But anyway, the thing was, everything kind of like came to a head, like the pressure, because there's this like paralysis, this analysis paralysis, like, you know, things are looming, and it's like the bigger it gets on you, like the less you can do. And so it's like things would just be like that. And it's like, I would just go over here and do this. But when my family started falling apart, my relationship fell apart that I was in, and I just made a choice just to go self-medicate, because I'm not stupid. You know what I'm saying? I know what I did the research, because it was the year I went to college. Actually, we stayed up midterm studying, and one of my buddies had brought some of his brother's Ritalin back from his hometown. Okay. And everybody was taking it to stay up, right? I took it, and I was like,
you're falling asleep?
Got the AD. I went out, and I was like, dude, I cannot afford to fall asleep right now. Like, I'm crunching to get my papers done, right? And he's like, bro, you got the ADHD. He's like, there's no way you would have responded like that if you did.
Well,
like, you need to look into that.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be that people would say that your response to a medication was an indication of whether or not you actually have ADHD. We actually now know that's not actually the case, because everybody responds a bit differently.
Okay. Well, all I know is it relaxed me. And like I said, I'm coming from like, what are you talking about? ADHD, like, just like everybody, I've heard of it, but it's this, I've heard it's in little kids that you can't get to sit still. That's what I enjoy listening to you guys about, because I'm learning a lot of things. But that kind of like planted the seed, and it started making things make sense. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, but nobody's trying to hear it. They're like, you're a grown man, take care of your business, do this. And I'm like, okay, try as I might. I just couldn't make them happy. So I choose to be homeless, because I'm not putting up with nobody's BS. I'm not like kowtowing to anybody, because I would rather stand up for what I believe in than live with all the amenities of a comfortable life, knowing that I am not honoring my truth. That's just kind of like a baseline thing about me. And I'll do that. You know what I'm saying? I got in a lot of trouble over my life for that. But so there's this homeless, like a mission in the town in Kentucky, like where they didn't want me. People were just like, you just need to go away. You've already created too many enemies here in the wrong places and blah, blah, blah. And, they were doing the best they could. I got to give it that. You know what I'm saying? They were just doing what they knew how to do. I was just doing what I knew how to do. Two immovable objects, collide. But there was a lady who took a special interest in me, I guess, because she had worked in the legal office where I had so much conflict with people. And she said she was behind the scenes and knew the personalization. So to me, a legal system is not about your personal feelings. It's about a legislative body that says this is the way we operate. It's not, we don't like him, so we're going to get him. Small town kind of stuff, right? And she was just like, something happened, because I was immediately defensive with her because she worked in that office. So I was like, oh, I already know how you feel about me, because I've dealt with this. And something happened, like, where I was like, okay, if I want to get in and shift this whole thing, maybe I need to listen. Something just dawned on me. And I think it was because I helped her carry something. Okay. Like, she saw a break. She was just a very pure example of like compassion. She finally got that chance to see like what my grandma knew, my dad knew. Like, in my heart, I'm a good person. I know I'm not out for malintent. And I think it was just because I helped her carry something. I was like, I'm sure you're totally capable of doing it, but my upbringing says you won't do it around me. That's just what I do. And so it kind of began this thing, and she's like, okay, so let's look at the facts. I don't think you're the kind of person who's intentionally just saying F you. She goes, I've seen cases like that where people don't care, and they're going to get away with all they can get away with. She's like, your record shows you made efforts. You tried. You just couldn't sustain. and then I had to go do time. And that was like right after my dad died. Like I actually got another year on another charge because my dad was dying with cancer. And the coolest thing was this whole process, he's in hospice, right? And so I'm the kind of person that I have felony warrants on me, but I'm not turning myself in because I know he's sick and he don't have nobody to take care of him. So I tell the hospice people what's up. I'm like, you just need to know, here's my situation. Here's our situation. He's here in your care and I'm going to stay with him, but I'm not going to bring that kind of noise into this because I consider that like a sacred space. You know what I'm saying? That's a process of life. It's a lot of Native American cultures look at it as a ceremonial process, but they were really cool. They like made all the accommodations for me to be able to stay with my dad. Same thing at the funeral home after he passed away, and I coped with that with substances. That was the only way I could function. And, I self-medicated with stimulants, of course, like not prescription, whatever, just did my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just kind of like the person that I didn't fit the stereotype of like an illicit drug user. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you were truly self-medicating. Like it wasn't just recreational, just to get high or just to numb out. It was
right.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not going to say that there weren't times where I got bent out of frame. You can always go too far, especially when it's not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So the funeral home, a month to the day after my dad passed, I got picked up by, they finally caught me with the warrants. So I ended up doing like pretty much 2 years. Well, the same lady who was like kind of like my benefactor in one sense kind of showed up and she's like, look, here's what you need to do. And she stayed with me and walked with me through the process of filing for my SSI.
Okay.
She had me sit up with a psychologist, like a licensed clinical psychologist when I got out. So that was the first time I've really ever, it makes me emotional because there's a lot of love, you know what I'm saying? And it was like such a turning point after that long of just screaming for help that somebody stuck and stayed. This was unexpected, but even like the situation was too much for that person, like they had to step away, but they got me on the right track.
What was that clinical psychologist saying to you that was, and that was really helpful to you or really kind of moved you?
Well, it was actually the lady and her compassion, but there's the genuine concern, like, okay, it's funny how when you just have a couple people that will vouch for your character, you can translate easier into people just accepting who you are. It's like, because I guess I had got to a point where I'd become so jaded and like rigid and defensive that I was coming off like an asshole and didn't even really know because all I knew was I was just reacting. But she's like, we're going to figure this out. And then she referred me to a nurse practitioner psychiatrist. And that's where I first got like medicated, because the funny thing is I knew this lady from another, like probably 15 years before in my life. That's who walks out to be my psychiatrist. And she's like, she looks at me and she goes, Jeremy? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I thought that was you. So we sit and we had a dialogue and she's like, what medicines have you been on before? I'm like, I've never been medicated. She goes, you're kidding me. She's like, I knew that way back when, She's like, I knew you needed medication then. And she's like, okay, so let's start this. And it started out with like depression medication and anxiety medication. And then I came back,
Did that help?
It started, yeah, it was different, like following a regimen, regulated doses and things like that. And then probably about 3+ months in, like, after all the assessments and everything like that, because I got assessed for like a vocational rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, I don't know, the lady's like, clearly ADHD, clearly. And it was just like, but no one had ever given me the proper test for it. It was all speculative, right? but she went ahead and treated me for it. And I guess it was her feedback whenever I came back the next month. She's like, if you could just see how you presented walking in the door, she's like, I'm just blown away. And that kind of began the journey. But then when I moved from Kentucky to West Virginia, because I was still homeless at this time. And like I said, I've just always been divinely blessed by people showing up. And, you know, I met a guy and he's like, man, I got a room, you can stay, you know, and I kind of had shelter until everything came through with my SSI.
Let me back you up for a sec. So when you were with this psychiatrist, is that who diagnosed you with ADHD?
She did, but I was never given any tests because this was back in like 2017, 2018. Okay. But she went ahead and prescribed me for the ADHD.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I moved to West Virginia that, number one, when I left Kentucky and came to West Virginia, like West Virginia is very stringent on their prescription. They put me on Strattera. They put me on like, what else was it? Fluoxetine, I think, trying all those things. And I went through almost probably about a good year of just being very off, trying different medications and different things, but knowing the process of the medical field. You know, there's like a step-by-step process. We're going to try this first because we're not giving you this because it's, you know, the big bad stimulant world. And I'm like, look, I know what works for me. I do. This is where I function best because at one point, and I'll say this, when I was self-medicating, like I would microdose myself with stimulants. And that's probably the most cohesive functioning time I ever had in my life. But then when I would tell people what I was doing they're like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm like, well, what I'm doing is probably not very socially acceptable, but I've figured out this method to a madness. But anyway, so I finally saw a clinician here. He's like, you know what? We got all this speculation. He's like, I'm going to order these tests. He goes, that way we got fact, like hard fact, clinical tests that no one can refute. It's not speculation. It's on paper. And he fought for a good like 2-3 months with the insurance company to get them to cover the test. But he didn't let up off of it. He really went to bat for me. He's like, cause you need help. He's like, but this is the only way we're going to get it for you is take these steps, adhere to this, you know, process. And that's how you do it. And he made a lot of sense, you know, but he's someone who has like experience in the field, but he also has experience in the process of like recovery. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a really good fit. And I actually still haven't seen a psychiatrist since I've been to West Virginia. I got one coming up, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like I'm on a pretty good like regimen now because I started school. Like all this.
What was it that made you that was your sort of the impetus for you to go back to school? I mean, you're 46 years old and you're now studying, what was it? Something with technology and engineering.
Safety engineering, safety technology.
Okay. So what was it that made you go, you know, I think I'm going to go back to school? Well,
in all the assessments I had, like since I'm not really, so I don't fit at a 9 to 5, you know what I'm saying? Or like standing still or like adhering to do it this way because that's the only way to do it because I can get in quick and I excel right off the bat, but it's like long sustained interactions and like dynamics that kind of inevitably and like I always got away with that because I traveled around so much, just kind of kept it brief in any setting I was in or I'd work with my dad, you know what I'm saying? People who knew how I was, but there was like post-secondary education is probably a very viable route for this, you know, for his process because we don't really see him. I don't know. There was like so here's the thing. I'm going to say this because people were telling me, because I'm like, something's not right with me. So people were telling me to don't bathe, to don't take care of myself, to basically just let myself become like degraded so I could qualify for help. You know what I'm saying? To get like some kind of like help with my issues. And I was like, I couldn't get down with that. I was like, I don't have to stink, you know, just because I was taught how to like take care of myself hygiene wise doesn't really mean I was like integrated with the ability to like balance budgets and, you know, be a functioning adult. But it's like, I remember the lawyer told me, because I got my decision really quick and I was just honest, you know, and even they were like, what's wrong with you? Like they thought I was on drugs when I wasn't medicated. You know what I'm saying? Because I was so hyper. Like, what are you on? I'm like, nothing. I don't have my medication. She said, you know, back through every stage of your process, there's a continuity, a baseline, like, you know, because you know how it is in like psychology and stuff like that. They can tell if people are feigning, you know what I'm saying? Trying to put on things, like they got tests for that. And I felt really good that I did it honestly. Like I was authentic, I was legitimate, and I was like, I need help. And here's what, you know, here's my story. Kind of like this, except for a bunch of different times, right? It's like, I got to meet somebody else and I got to tell them my story. But I really, there was something kind of like a vindication in that, because there was a truth, you know what I'm saying? Because so many people get bent out of frame, like, oh, I got this. And they say they're just drug seeking and they're just this and they're just that. So to really authentically, you know, like authentically ADHD, present myself truthfully and like get the feedback and the vindication, so to speak, you know, for all those years of like, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to get your shit together. I'm like, help me.
Yeah.
Can you help me with that?
So you know, from the time you're in high school to now, it's been a journey of really good intentions to a lot of missteps with a strong personality.
Well put. Well put, Eric.
And a lot of just variables of circumstance.
Yeah.
And so like one of the things that you had said that, you know, kind of wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think with all the traveling and the moving around and just kind of like, I was always avoiding this internal work, you know, because at some point in time, you got to face the man in the mirror, you know, on any level of any like psychological modality that you look at. There has to be a point of meeting yourself and knowing yourself, knowing your light, knowing your shadow, kind of like you get into Jungian archetypes, right? Like there's this pristine, like ideal version of you, but then there's this like not so great part of you that does things that you really have this guilt, shame, remorse about, but you have to own it, right? You can't deny it, or you start fragmenting the personality. So it's like, if we're into wholeness, if we're bringing it all together to present as a cohesive unit so that we can function in a socially working model, which is what I've tried to do, but I really wanted to do it authentically. I didn't want to do it mindlessly or in a not cowardly, but no kowtowing. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to bow down. Now, if you show me you can present legitimately and that you're there and you're presenting yourself authentically, I'll get with you. You know, I think that's one of the things I was attracted to about your podcast. And I got like really excited because it was like one of the first things I started listening to that was factually based. You've done work in the field. You were doing work in like having coping mechanisms and strategies and things like that. I'm like, see, that's what I need to get down with instead of this aimless throwing darts in the dark, spinning around in circles. Where's the board at? But we're going to throw it anyway and just hope it hits the board, you know?
That's the whole reason to have goals, so we don't throw a dart at a person instead of the dartboard.
You put your eye out, kid.
Right. Like maybe we'll hit the wall, but at least it's the wall that was intended for the darts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. It's just very logical. Like we were talking before we got on here about, it's practical. You know what I'm saying? Like you can have this idealistic kind of like perspective. If it's not gauged in some kind of like empirically proven process, then it doesn't come together wholly. If that makes sense.
It does. And Jeremy, hearing your story, I think, and I hope that for listeners, no matter kind of what you're personally going through, no matter what sort of the depth of your the lowest place you can go to, no matter kind of what shit life's thrown at you and how you've been, how life's just, throwing too many curveballs and has beamed you too many times. I'll give you your baseball metaphors there.
Right.
I think that if Jeremy can get back up at 46 years old and go back to school and continue learning and own his shit and working on it as he can, it's never too late. It's never too late. And, so Jeremy's making this, he's on this path towards improvement. There will probably be other missteps, and like all the ones that in the past, you'll figure this out. So,
right,
man, keep on doing what you're doing here, Jeremy. It's I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Hey, buddy, I appreciate you having me on for real. I just want to say it ain't. If you fall down 7 times, as long as you get up 8, you're all right.
That's right.
And like a lot of respect and love to you for real for what you're doing. It's a productive, positive message. It's kind of been very pivotal. That's not even a word.
It is today.
Pivotal in my process to get grounded, because it's not been easy. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of, it don't got to be pretty as long as it's not how you start, it's how you finish kind of deal. And I don't feel 46, just so you know. In my mind, I'm like 26.
Me too. And I'm like 20, and then I look in the mirror. I'm like, where the hell did all my hair go?
What happened? I started shaving my head like 25 years ago, man. I just said, just forget about it, because I was born with a 5 head anyway. Right?
Jeremy Franklin, thank you so much for sharing your story on the podcast. I really appreciate it and wish you the very best of luck and success, and keep growing.
Hey, buddy, I appreciate you, man, for real. Thanks a lot for having me.
You bet. Take care. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability, and if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.